Good evening and welcome to this called meeting of the Northside Board of Trustees. Before calling this meeting to order, the board would like to take just a moment to briefly review some of the rules for conducting our meeting. It's important to note that on March 16th, 2020, Governor Greg Abbott granted a request by the Attorney General to temporarily suspend a limited number of open meeting laws to the extent necessary to allow telephonic or video conference meetings in response to the coronavirus. I'll now ask Mrs. McGee to call the roll of trustees.
Dr. Harrell.
Here.
Ms. Freeman. Mr. Medina.
Present.
Mr. Lopez.
Here.
Ms. Chumley. Mr. Blunt.
Present.
Ms. Reed.
Present. Thank you, Ms. McGee. In accordance with those suspended rules mentioned above, we certify the following. Notice of this meeting has been posted online for at least 72 hours. We do have a quorum in attendance through in-person and virtual means. We are meeting in part by use of a software application which allows communication among trustees. As we would with any in-person meeting, members of the public who have followed the instructions on the meeting notice for registering to address a specific agenda item will be limited to no more than 3 minutes to speak. All other meeting procedures will adhere to board-operated procedures to the extent practical. An audio recording of this meeting is being made and will be available to the public at a later date. We apologize in advance for any unforeseeable difficulties and ask for your patience as we navigate unprecedented conditions. The order of business for this meeting is set out in the agenda. The meeting will then be officially called to order. Please stand and bow your heads as Trustee Reed leads us in the invocation and pledges of allegiance.
Almighty and merciful God, we ask your guidance and blessings upon this board, students, parents, patrons, teachers, and administrators, as we are assembled here this evening in the common pursuit of this great nation's wealth, our children. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, Mrs. Reed. All right, we will go ahead and go down our agenda, starting with item 12, Business and Finance.
Thank you, Dr. Harrell, members of the board. Tonight, as we do at this called meeting each year in February, we bring the board a first look at what we are thinking of with regard to the budget for the upcoming 2021-22 school year. As the board has heard dozens of times in the last several months, there's a fair amount of uncertainty baked into to that budget. Given that many things from enrollment projections to state guidance and the kind of teaching that we'll be allowed to do in our schools next year are some of the many things that are still open. But there are things that we know, and we will cover that tonight. We'll also try to highlight some of the things that we clearly do not know and are asking for answers on, and we'll give just a high-level overview. As you are used to in the cadence of budget planning, we'll be back in April for a little deeper dive into the budget planning for next year, and we will cover what that tentative calendar is tonight as our last slide. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Barajas for the presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Woods. Before we jump into the early analysis of the 21-22 budget, I'll kind of give you a state of the current budget, the 2021. Next slide, please. Just some numbers. So the budget was built around 104,722 enrollment with an ADA of 97,732. basic building blocks of any budget. Our snapshot date enrollment, which is the last Friday in October that we reported to TEA, was 103,151. So the numbers are not that different from what we built the budget around. We entered this budget as we're entering the next budget with a lot of uncertainty. So we got pretty close. The actual ADA for the first 3 6-week periods is 95%. That's as calculated by our team who does the calculation for our average daily attendance. Well, that number is not too far off from what we historically have as average daily attendance. So while there is still a lot of uncertainty, the numbers are not that far off from what we planned on back April, May, June, July timeframe. The hold harmless, as we've talked about, is still in effect for the first 3 6-week periods as per TEA. There is no word on an extension into the 6-week periods 4, 5, and 6. So the calculation for what we are actually going to earn, because we earn state funding based on our average daily attendance, is a bit more complicated this year simply because we have half the year with a hold harmless amount, and then the other half we're on our own. So we'll be having to get reports to see where we're trending to blend those two numbers together to determine what our revenues are going to be like for this fiscal year. Tax collections, those remained fairly consistent to last year. So one of the concerns we had was, will we see a drop in current tax collections in comparison to last year or even the year before? But in the analysis that I've done along with people in the business office, it appears to be just in line, maybe 1.5% to 2% lower than last year, same time through January of 21, January of 20. We do see, as I talked about, the lower enrollment, but that is primarily in pre-K and kindergarten. And you'll see this later this month as far as where our COVID-related expenditures through the end of January are $14.9 million, while our CARES Act reimbursements total $21.6 million. We have been looking at the sweep estimate, as we call it here in Northside, and that number does appear to be larger than what we've seen in the past, which is par for the course simply because there are a lot of campuses and departments that, because of the nature of COVID and how we're operating, they're not spending their budget. So we'll be taking a look at that, and we'll make those sweep adjustments in budget amendment number 2, which is scheduled for the March board meeting. Next slide, please.
Just a couple of quick comments. If you can go back, Monica. Thank you. Also want to open up for any questions. On that second to last bullet, remember that CARES Act dollars flowed to the district, but then the state withheld an equal number of dollars in state funding. So while we show the $21.6 million in reimbursement, 17.3 or 4
Approximately.
was actually pulled back in state aid. So that's the way that money flowed. Renee will talk in a little bit about what little we know about the second round of stimulus funding that the state has received, but we have not yet received. On the last bullet around expenditures trending lower, as you can imagine, we've been fairly conservative in filling positions that didn't directly impact students in a classroom. And so that is a part of why those expenditures are trending lower. That is a positive sign, obviously, for as we're closing out this budget year. Questions here, comments before we move forward?
Ms. Reed?
I have a question about the one second from the last one there. The state withheld half of the money that we were given?
No. The way the calculation worked out is based on the Title I funding formulas. And so each district had a calculated amount based on enrollment and Title I funding formulas. That amount for us was right at, I'm looking at you, Esperanza, 17.3 million.
Okay. So then the additional over that, the state kept?
No. The 17.3 was flowed to the district, but then the state withheld an equal dollar amount. So it netted to 0 for us. So from the state perspective, you could say we've been reimbursed those dollars. That, in fact, was not true because the state funding that would have normally flowed was held back in an equal dollar amount. So it literally netted to 0.
What did the state do with that money?
That's-
They supplanted the budget, the state's budget, and from their perspective would say that, that is how we were held harmless in the fall. They would say that is how they've done some of the programs to reimburse technology purchases, to buy PPE for districts in the state. So I'm not giving you my perspective, I'm giving you what would be their perspective. That's where those dollars went.
So they're saying that even though they withheld it, it actually all came to us eventually in some form.
That would be a tortured argument, and we could easily show using numbers was not
Not the
accurate.
case.
Right.
Trustee Reed, I think what makes the point is that we actually have two ADAs for 1920. We have the ADA that we reported up until the hold harmless period started, and they paid us on that, a reduced ADA, because they didn't count, March 20th to the end of the year. So they said, oh, well, if that ADA is equal to some number, we're going to go ahead and pay you for that, but we're going to use ESSER dollars, and we're going to save our FSP, which is a foundation school program. So we were made whole, and we earned or were paid everything we should have, but the state pulled back the money from us through FSP and supplanted it with the federal dollars.
Okay.
Karen?
Yes, thanks. So clarification on the second to the last one again. So we have been given or reimbursed the 17 some odd million. Is that correct? That has already come to us?
Tortured argument.
It did flow to us,
And-
and then simultaneously, an equal dollar amount of state funding that would have flowed to us was held back.
Right? But we can show expenditures of 14.9.
We can show expenditures of 14.9 that is growing over time.
That would be my question. We're going to have no problem showing that we're going to have expenditures by the end of over that 17.
No, ma'am. If you look at those 14.9 in actual expenditures and purchase orders that are outstanding, they will by far and away exceed that number.
Okay, thank you.
So I had a real quick question too. Bobby, did you have a question before I ask? So some of the things that were purchased right away by the state through TEA, like Schoology and virtual curriculum, was that part of this money as well? Or?
Yes.
No.
So really, just everything we have, I mean, we had already purchased Schoology, right? We already have curriculum. So really, some of our money was used to support other districts, right? And throughout the state, we don't have a virtual curriculum, but yet that was used, a large sum was used to purchase that, among other things. I'm wondering what other things we already had in place that money was used for to help. And I believe in helping everybody, don't get me wrong, but I'm just wondering, we did get reimbursed for Schoology though, right?
We did.
Or we're supposed to get reimbursed?
Well, we were in the
No,
process.
not yet.
We were in the process of negotiating a contract with Schoology, and then we were told that, no, the state is going to go in and buy the basic plan of Schoology, and anything above and beyond, which we did, we wanted the enhancements.
Gotcha.
We did pay for that, but Schoology proper, that was paid for by the state. So we pulled the plug on the contract we had gone through and negotiated with them, because, again, none of us were privy to the fact that Schoology and TEA were talking, so it was provided to us, but we did buy things that weren't provided with the TEA purchase Schoology.
And there wasn't another choice. I mean, Schoology the state was basically saying, we'll give this to you free. There's
Yes.
That's correct.
no other LMS.
Unless,
Okay.
unless it's completely on your dime.
Okay. All right. All right, thanks.
All right, moving on.
Did Gerald have a question?
Oh, sorry.
Gerald?
Sorry, Gerald, I apologize.
Thanks. Oh, there's your hand. I'm so sorry. Thank you.
He's muted, though.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm really lost as far as the item, right before expenditures and trending lower than the food estimates. I'm kind of stuck on that second, on the item before that. But I guess I can get more discussion with Renee on that. The question that I had was regarding the current enrollment loss in our primary, the pre-K and kindergarten. Did we not expand that this year, Brian? Was there a hold on it? Didn't we put a hold on that prior to this year?
We did, we put a hold on full-day pre-K expansion, given the budget situation that we saw coming. And so, however, I don't believe that that's related to fewer students showing up. That's a trend that exists all over the country. And so I don't think those things are necessarily.
So did we have a big loss of enrollment? Or was that, when we say loss, how much was it in a loss?
I don't have the number off the top of my head. My guess is right at 50% of the total enrollment decline is in those two grades.
Okay.
And again, that's a consistent pattern, really not just in the state, but in the country.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Lopez. Joseph, did you have a question before we moved on?
Pardon me, no, I don't, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, now we can move into what, we'll talk about the 21-22 budget. As Dr. Woods mentioned, kind of cover some things that we know right off the bat. We know both the House and the Senate budgets both fully fund the foundation school program, or another way of saying is that they're going to continue to fully fund HB 3, which is the school finance law of the land. If we do receive any reduction in our entitlements under House Bill 3, as I like to call capital E entitlements, those are going to be as a result of lower attendance or lower enrollment, not because they're going to be pulling back. Now, that's as of today, but you know the legislature just started meeting several weeks ago, so we're not expecting them to do anything to our current level of funding. So we will start building the budget around the formulas that are in House Bill 3. As I mentioned, House Bill 3 is the law of the land. As you remember, 2 years ago, it increased the...
I have a question. I have another question.
Sure. I'm sorry, disembodied voice.
It's kind of cutting out on my side, but when we say that we're going to build a budget, for 22, for 21, 22, are we going to use what numbers are we going to use for, we're going to use the 108? Are we using that number?
I'm sorry, you were breaking up at the end. Are we going to use what numbers?
Well, to build our budget, should we use a 97.1?
Well, we'll come up with a new estimate based on budget and resource planning working together to come up with the most reasonable, conservative number. Again, in these strange times we're in, how conservative do we want to be? Do we want to lower it from the number we used this year, expecting a further decrease in enrollment, or do we let it ride? I don't know. We'll know that in a few months after we look at the tea leaves and try to figure out what is the trend in enrollment the second semester telling us to portend what's going to happen in 21-22.
I think we'll be able to bring a better guess at that in the April conversation. That way we'll have a couple more months of second semester ADA under our belt and have a better guess at what that might be. Obviously, we're projecting enrollment used to be based a lot on history. Obviously, that doesn't work anymore in the current environment. And so we're having to stand up a whole new system to try to project enrollment.
And then also conditions conditions may improve later on, so, hopefully, right? Okay, thank you, Renee, I appreciate it.
Sure. Just a couple of other points regarding House Bill 3. They changed or added weighted funding. For instance, Comp Ed is completely different, how we receive those funds. Dyslexia, for instance, is a new weighted funding. They did fund full-day pre-K, There is an additional day school year program, and there's Tier 1 tax rate compression. So this is the first time we're seeing it in the fiscal year we're in, where our tax rate is going to be compressed based on our property values vis-à-vis the state's increase in property value. So every year is a new game for us to have to play with these formulas to determine what our compressed M&O tax rate is going to be. There is a possibility of some cleanup bills for some things that were hastily put together in House Bill 3. I don't know if, I've not seen anything that's come out regarding any kind of cleanup bill. One of them would probably be, I think, around the additional day school year with the 180-day issue. Therefore, we could be eligible for that. Presently, we are not. So we'll have to see what's going to happen with the legislature. Access to the fifth golden penny. If you remember from the last budget adoption, we talked about accessing the fifth golden penny for the 2021 school year. There was a slight wrinkle in that the board had to vote unanimously for the adoption of the tax rate. Had that not happened, then we would have been forced back to only the 4 golden pennies on top of our compressed tax rate. Going forward, unless there's another bill that's put forward, it's just a normal routine tax rate adoption in August for us. Which in this case, I would recommend that whatever the TEA calculated MCR, or the maximum compressed tax rate is, we go ahead and add the 5 pennies on top of that.
Questions before we move on?
Everybody good? All right, we're good.
Okay.
All right, as I said before, we're going to build the budget based on some conservative estimates that we will decipher over the next few months. I think time is our friend, as Dr. Woods mentioned. Once we get some more data to suggest what's going to happen in the fall, we'll use that and start to build the budget around those numbers. This includes property value increases or decreases in property values, for instance. We will continue to have COVID-related expenditures as part of the budget that will probably continue into the fall or even longer. All of that will be part of our budget discussion in April and May and June, and when we talk about the budget, about how much money is in this proposed budget for us to deal with any COVID-related expenditures. Instruction or otherwise, I have a couple of things here. PPE, the continual purchase of that. Technology, payroll, for instance, for issues that come up regarding servicing our students. An increase in instructional remediation. In other words, our service delivery model may change a bit in the fall into the spring, and if that has an inherent cost built into it, we should reflect that in the budget. Again, the compression of the tax rate is going to be based on our value growth exceeding that of the state. We don't know what that's going to be right now, but that'll all come to fruition throughout the summer as we get information from the appraisal district to suggest what our property values are going to be in late July, so then we can have the MCR calculated and prepared for the board to consider for adoption in the month of August. The second round of federal assistance, in fact, Dr. Woods and I were talking about this today because this is very, very confusing because the CARES Act, as we've been referring to it for so long, has a corollary in something called CRRSA, the CRRSA, which is the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act. So CARES Act and CRRSA are basically equal in their two stimulus packages. But under the CARES Act, we had things like Operation Connectivity, we had ESSER 1 and the PPRP and TDEM. Somebody please stop me. And under the CRRSA, all we have right now is ESSER 2. So you'll hear us referring to this second round of funding, of which we don't know how much that's going to be. But we know there is an ESSER 2 under CRRSA, but we haven't really received many details as far as what are we going to be eligible for, how can we use it, when can we use it, when will we be eligible, what will be eligible. We don't know that yet, but the group that I work with are very good about keeping tabs on that so they can keep myself and Dr. Woods abreast of all this because it is very confusing to try to follow. Oh, and there's no increase in employee health insurance premiums for the 21-22 school year. So a little sliver of good news.
So just a couple of comments here, and then we'll stop for questions if there are any. On the bullet on increased instructional remediation, I think board knows that we've been talking for months now about the long-range remediation that'll be needed for at least some students. That has begun already in the current year, and this spring semester. We will bring in Budget Amendment 2, likely in March, a look at summer programming, and as you might imagine, it will be quite large compared to what we've done in the past, and quite large from a budgetary standpoint as well. So that is to come in this budget year, and then we believe we will need to plan for similar amounts of remediation in the, not only in 21, 22, but likely beyond. And obviously that'll weigh on the budget to a degree. Quickly on ESSER 2, just a sense, and as Renee said, we don't know what of that will flow to the district, how that might flow. Will some of it or all of it theoretically be a supplant, much like CARES dollars was? But just to give the board a sense of what that looks like, the amount of that second round of stimulus at the state level is just over 4 times greater than what the CARES Act dollars were. So we're talking about significant dollars, over $5 billion sitting at the state level for public schools. So just to give you a little sense of what that looks like. Questions before we move on?
I have one.
Gerald?
I have one. When we talk about the increase in instructional remediation, Brian, are we talking about bringing the kids into the classrooms?
We're going.
Or would that be like how would that look like?
We're prepared to do both because obviously we can't project what's going to happen, this spring and summer. So we're preparing to actually do both of those, hoping that virtual learners that have not yet been successful in that setting, we can get in the building and improve their chance of success. But we'll prepare on the C&I side to offer both.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Hall.
Ms. Freeman?
Yes. Dr. Woods, I thought I heard somewhere in the rollout of the Carissa funds that the states were not going to be allowed to use that as a supplant. Was there discussion? And so if there was, then why don't we have any confidence? Oh,
Yeah,
tell me about that.
The latest that I hear from folks who are truly expert in this is that the language was written in a similar enough way to the original CARES Act that the state will be allowed to use at least some of those dollars to supplant their budget. And we've got that recently and on pretty darn good authority.
Thank you.
I think Mr. Medina had a question.
I do too.
Joseph, and then Katie?
Would this be a recurring assistance, or is this a single time assistance now that we're in for the long haul, whether it's a new platform for instructions or the continued expenditures for PPE and additional, custodial and other costs that are accumulating?
Mr. Medina, do you mean the federal stimulus dollars?
Yes.
Yeah, the federal stimulus dollars all have an expiration date. At least the ones passed so far must be spent by a certain date, so they are not ongoing dollars. I'll avoid getting in the weeds, but for those who can recall the 2009 to 2011 timeframe, we're beginning to feel a little deja vu all over again, where federal stimulus dollars were used to prop up the state's economy in late 2008, 9, and early 2010. And then when they went away, like these dollars will go away, it created a fiscal cliff in the state, which trickled down to school districts. And anybody who was on this board in 2011 will have nightmarish memories of what that budget building process looked like. And so one of the things that we've got to guard against, just like we did in Northside in 2010 and 2011, is that funding cliff be such a negative impact to us if history was to repeat. And so that is something that Renee and I and the team talk about to try to obviously avoid that happening, trying to look out in the future. Mrs. Reed?
Ms. Reed?
Yeah, I have just a question, not that was brought up right now, but as to our processes that are ongoing. I know that we allowed more students to come back inside to the classroom this week. Have those numbers been significant or just sort of dribbling in?
I don't know the answer to that. I can't give you a statistic, Mrs. Reed. What I can tell you anecdotally is I think we've seen at many elementary campuses a healthy number return to the building, less so at secondary.
Okay. But in secondary, they go just a couple days and they're home the other two?
At high school, they have a hybrid schedule, but that's the only level that runs that schedule.
So middle school is on the same kind of a schedule as always, just
Yes,
fewer
ma'am.
people?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right.
I think it's important to note that the Carissa, this act was passed in December of 2020. So this has nothing to do with the latest round of stimulus that, we are currently banding about. So this happened during the interregnum between the two administrations. We have no idea whether or not, and this, the $1,400 check and the $3,000 per child that is kind of making the news, if there's any part of that that's going to flow down to states for education, we have no idea what that amount is going to be. So we're trying to keep these separate to be able to explain to the board, for instance, where we are and how we can use all these monies, because they start to overlap at times, and we're trying to figure out where are we, what fund are we talking about, and what's the deadline, and then they change the rules regarding, now this is eligible, now this isn't, we're extending the deadline, so we're trying to keep all of this straight. And so these are the two we have right now, even though under the Carissa and the ESSER 2, we don't have anything to go on other than that the money is going to be available. As Dr. Woods mentioned, it's quite sizable, but it hasn't been parsed out for how much we're going to get for all these other different sub-funds, if you will. So what we do not know, there's quite a bit. As I mentioned, taxable value growth, that's certainly going to have an impact on our M&O tax rate. But in the grand scheme of House Bill 3, if our M&O tax rate goes down, all it means is that we get more money from the state, because remember, we're always getting our capital E entitlement based on House Bill 3 and the number of kids we have. Level of federal assistance under ESSER 2, don't know. Reimbursements, are they going to do an FSP swap? The new grants, is it going to be for technology? Is it going to be for some of the things other trustees have mentioned? Are they going to give us money for more PPE, cleaning? We have no idea. All that will be fleshed out, and we certainly have a big enough team to be able to look at that, to avail ourselves of any money that we can apply for or will be eligible for. And kind of as I talked about it earlier, but it really is the elephant in the room, is hold harmless from the state, the second semester. In my conversation with Dr. Woods, he mentioned that perhaps we'd know something later this month or into early March. Well, in the meantime, we're building a budget around no hold harmless for the second semester. And at some point, if we do hear there is a hold harmless, then we'll have to readjust our numbers, because then we'll have a better sense of, okay, now we kind of know where our base level is going to be for hold harmless versus what our actual ADA is going to be. So that's another calculation that we'll have to go through. The continued level of financial assistance to child nutrition. We got some good news today from Mr. Weary that we might be eligible for upwards of $3 million from a different grant that I was a bit suspicious of, because I had not seen anything about this. It's coming from the USDA. As far as I can tell, this has nothing to do with ESSER or CARES or anything, so that would certainly help, but until I see something that says, here's your grant application, here's how much you're going to get, we'll make the adjustments to the child nutrition budget for this year for their shortfall, as well as what we can expect for next year as well. And again, we talked about it a bit, the cost of instructional delivery for next year. We'll have to factor all those unknowns into the budget so we can be prepared very quickly to make those adjustments without having to go back to the board, for instance, for budget amendments in September, October, November, because we didn't have the forethought to put money in the budget for things that we just don't know are going to happen in the fall.
Mr. Lopez?
Thank you, Dr. Hall. Brian, when we're talking about level of financial assistance to child nutrition, we're talking about reimbursement, are we able to get reimbursed for all of the meals that we put out there? Because I know we did breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? And I know that came to a big amount. Will we be able to will we be getting reimbursed for that?
Yes, sir. We actually have been reimbursed for the feeding that we've done so far. All of the feeding of students, whether it was in building or at curbside, was eligible for reimbursement. However, as you can imagine, the numbers aren't nearly what we would see in a normal day, right? In a normal day, we would be in excess of 100,000 meals served. Today, we actually had an uptick from the past, and it was just over 40,000. So you can imagine that the volume is just nothing like it would be, and that's causing a budget strain on the child nutrition is a self-sustaining budget in every district in the state, and that's causing a strain on those budgets just because they're serving fewer meals, fewer reimbursable meals than they would have in a normal year.
Are there still families coming during lunchtime or dinner? Do we still do that, or has that phased out already?
No, sir. We're still doing curbside feeding.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Harlan.
I think we're ready.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
One, oh, Bobby?
Yeah, just one, and this in our don't know category. Beyond the Clarissa and the other associated federal funds, any hope, always hope, that increased funding for Title I and special education, given the new administration supposedly emphasis and finding more funding for schools.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think
Good. All right. As long as we got
hope, but I don't think, Mr. Blunt, that we've seen anything filed.
Oh, you haven't? Okay.
Yeah, I think there's been,
Nothing, but I think that it's gonna be a priority, and that's what we're pushing for with IDEA and ESSA funding.
Okay. Thank you.
yeah, I think those were campaign type items, but we haven't seen bills filed. Yeah.
And real quick, any filings around mental health and social emotional for kids and teachers? Anything yet? Trying to get some more depth with the House Bill 3.
Naomi, you know of anything?
Anything being filed around mental health, social emotional for teachers and students?
There are a few bills, and I can send those to you.
Thanks. Does it feel like there's some momentum around that or some energy around it? Or is it just something like last time that was kind of left open-ended and up to the districts?
It's too soon to tell.
Okay.
But there is energy around it, and some really good members that are interested in public education. And there is energy around expanding Senate Bill 11, which we talked
Right,
about.
right?
So it's just been a snail session so far.
Okay.
But I'll keep you posted.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay.
All right.
Just a few comments about compensation. As done in the years past, our compensation group will be looking at making market adjustments initially to 90% for those employee groups that are falling below our market. And it's early, but we will look at, as the district has done in years past, at looking at a general increase, percentage increase, depending on, of course, available revenue. So that's always going to be something in the back of our mind, whether or not we can incorporate that into the budget we're developing, but only time will tell if we're going to have the revenue streams to support that. And lastly, here's just a very high-level view of the budget development calendar. We're already into the month of February. One change is that senior staff is going to review all of the growth and improvement packages this month, later in the month, before we leave for a spring break. And then everything from March down to August is pretty much in line with what we've done before, always with the caveat that this calendar could change based on new information that we have in front of us from either the federal level or at the state level, if any bill that Naomi makes us aware of that is going to impact our revenue, certainly an expenditure picture for the next year. So we're early in the budget process, but kind of laying out all of our cards to the board about what we know and what we don't know And as Dr. Woods mentioned, in April, we should have a better picture, I hope. But nonetheless, it'll be a picture.
Dr. Harrell, that's the presentation for tonight, unless there are additional questions.
Okay, this was discussion only, so we will now move to, and thank you, Mr. Barajas, appreciate it, to Superintendent, item 16.
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Harrell and members, we have 3 items related to the upcoming May 1 board election. The first 2 are standard items in any year in which we have a board election, an order calling for the trustee election, and then a resolution that allows us to work with the county to actually put the election on. So for those 2, and those 2, both items are on for the board's consideration. I'll turn it over to Naomi Miller to make those brief presentations.
Thank you, Dr. Woods. Dr. Harrell and trustees, this is the order to call the trustee election for single-member districts 5, 6, and 7, as you know. The application process began on January 13th, and it closes this Friday at 5 p.m., February 12th. So you'll see we have Exhibits A and B. So usually Exhibit A is our early voting calendar and draft form, and it's got some locations at least, and voting times and dates. Because of the unpredictability of COVID-19, the way that it affected the November election, our elections administrator was hesitant to put that out just yet, anticipating that there could be expanded dates and times, and that's just, that there's nothing on that yet, but she's not quite ready to put that out. So I'll keep you all updated, of course, as we get more information from the elections office. And then Exhibit B are our voting precincts in districts 5, 6, and 7. So this is the standard order that's required under the Texas Election Code, and I recommend the calling of the trustee election on May 1st, 2021, as presented in both English and Spanish, and I recommend approval.
Any questions? Ms. Reed, and then Mr. Blunt,
And Karen's got a question, too.
and then Karen.
Yes, ma'am.
We will share this election as normal with the city, is that not correct?
Yes, ma'am, we're
So the
gonna-
sites will be duplications of what the city has selected?
Say that one more time, duplications?
The sites that we will be using will be the same ones that the city has selected also, or
Right,
we do
yes,
that
that's
jointly
true.
with them?
It's the county that selects them, and yes, those will be those sites, but neither the city nor any other school district has that yet, because the elections office is putting a hold on that for
Yeah,
now.
wait and see.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Blunt? Okay. Karen? Freeman? Ms. Freeman?
I have a question. Naomi, so you said something about the locations, but I don't think I see that in here. Dr. Woods, now the November election the election day was on a Tuesday, so different than the local elections. And at that time, we asked about not using our schools because we had kids in school. So in May, we usually, in the past, have had a number of schools that have been polling sites on election day. Now, we don't have kids there. We have a lot of other things going on sometimes at our schools on Saturday. So what are our options, or do we have any?
We don't have a lot of options. The number of events occurring in the schools on Saturdays is reduced compared to what we would have seen
Sure.
in a normal spring. And so I think the problem is mitigated to a large degree. We will put something out to principals that if they have discretion on scheduling an event, that they try to avoid if they're at an election site that day. But again, we got to get a little further down the road and actually get the list of sites.
Yeah, usually we have early voting sites by now, which is usually NAC where we are, and then the other sites around the city that we recognize. But she's just, our elections administrator is not ready to make those decisions yet because of examples like the AT&T Center that was used. So that list is just not ready quite yet, but I'll bring that to y'all as soon as it's available.
All right, thank you. And I'll second the motion. Dr. Harrell.
All right, say it one more time, Ms. Freeman.
I will second the motion
Okay.
that Bobby made.
All right, thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. We'll do a roll call vote. Dr. Harrell, yes. Ms. Freeman?
Yes.
Mr. Medina?
Yes.
Mr. Lopez?
Yes.
Mr. Blunt?
Yes.
Ms. Reed? Yes. All right, it's been passed, and we will now move on to the second part.
So Northside ISD is required to hold a joint election with the city, and so the resolution that's before you is also standard like the order, but it gives the superintendent or his designee permission to enter into those negotiations with the elections administrator, and I recommend approval.
Okay, any questions? All right, is there a motion? All right, Ms. Reed is moving to approve, and Mr. Blunt seconded. So we'll do a roll call vote. Dr. Harrell, yes. Ms. Freeman?
Aye.
Mr. Medina?
Aye.
Mr. Lopez?
Aye.
Ms. Chumbley? Excuse me, Mr. Blunt?
Aye.
Ms. Reed? All right, the ayes have it. The motion's been passed. We will now move to item C.
Thank you, Dr. Harrell. As we do typically in board election years in the month of February, we invite folks who are candidates, who have signed up to be candidates for that election to announce their candidacy. Tonight, we're going to ask candidates who wish to make that announcement to keep their remarks to 3 minutes, which is in keeping with our normal practice, to talk about why they're interested in running for the board, and please avoid remarks, negative remarks about individuals. And I think what we'll do, given the COVID times in which we're living, is I'll call on folks as they arrive tonight who have signed up to run for the board. And Mrs. Freeman, that makes you first. And you can also feel free to decline
No,
for
that's-
any of the candidates.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Dr. Woods. I am Karen Freeman, and I seek reelection in May for Northside Single Member District Number 7. And in explaining my why I seek reelection, I must tell my story. I have a long history of commitment of service to Northside in our community. I have 4 children who each received their education in Northside from K through 12. From the beginning, I realized the vital role of volunteers and discovered a drive within me, a passion to help ensure that all children have the opportunities they need and deserve to pursue their dreams. Over the years, I've held leadership positions in PTAs and booster clubs. I volunteered as a member of the community to help pass the 95 bond and every subsequent bond thereafter. I was a member of school board advisory committees, bond advisory committees, school advisory teams, district strategic planning committees. When the opportunity came to seek election to the Northside Board in 2005, I accepted the challenge to continue to serve children and become even more of an advocate for public education. I am proud of the decisions made in this district for the benefit of our students, and they include magnet school expansion, STEM focus in all of our schools, CTE expansion, support of fine arts and athletics, dual language expansion, and extracurricular opportunities such as robotics. One of the biggest challenges currently is the pandemic. Our teachers turned around the way they teach essentially overnight. We continued to redefine the book on education during a pandemic. Decisions are made with thought of the long-term implications. We're having discussions now about offerings for next year and years to follow, as you heard Dr. Woods talk about. I'm a longtime active member of the Bexar County School Boards Coalition, and I'm assisting right now with the coalition and publishing a book on ISDs in Bexar County to become available in the near future. I'm a member of the National School Boards Association and graduated from Leadership TASB with the designation of Master Trustee. I've received the Texas Honorary Lifetime PTA membership and with the Helotes Chamber Lifetime Achievement Award. In 2012, I was elected to the board of directors of our state school board association, the Texas Association of School Boards, and currently serving my 9th year in that role. I've testified before the House Public Ed Committee on proposed legislation during past legislative sessions, and before the Texas State Board of Education on agenda items. I run for re-election to be able to continue that what I find myself in a unique position to make a positive difference, not only for the children in Northside, but to also make a positive impact on public education in the state of Texas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman.
Dr. Harrell, you would be next.
I think if it's okay, I'll defer to our guests.
Okay. All right. Well, then let me announce those folks.
Thanks.
And that will start with Mr. Blake Rowlett. I hope I'm right. Please come to the podium, sir. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks, everybody. So my name is Blake Rowlett, and I'm also running for School Board District 7 seat. So I am a software engineer by trade, and I don't have the kind of background that you just heard from Ms. Freeman in education, but I'm looking to kind of just change things up. I think a lot of people my age don't get involved in local politics, don't know anything about local politics or, voting or that sort of thing. So I'm just looking to throw my name into the ring and maybe bring a different perspective, let's say, or a different style of solving problems to the seat. Yeah, I do not have a ton to say. I'm a young man, probably one of the youngest people that's ever run for this seat, I'm guessing. But yeah, so I'm just looking to mix things up, maybe solve problems a different way, and hopefully I look forward to working with everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sharon Chumley.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Sharon Chumley, and I am not related to Melissa Chumley. But I am here to announce that I'm a candidate for Single District 5 for School Board Trustee. Tonight, I was instructed to tell reasons why I'm running for this position. My first statement is that I truly, truly believe in education as a solution to many problems. I believe in educating children and parents. I believe in educating teachers and administrators, and I have to say, this board and this NISD school district has been amazing in educating teachers, as was said, overnight to deal with COVID-19. I support the strong belief in education. To prove this, I've spent a lifetime in education. I've taught, I've supervised, I've written curriculum, and I've served on committees, several strategic committees. I have 47 years working in education, and during that time, I've seen it make a difference in poverty, at-risk populations. It has been a deterrent to crime, to gang increased affiliation, and I've also seen it help with many of the situations of children who do not want to come, that maybe are at-risk population, but those who are feeling bullied, et cetera, and I know that NISD, I witnessed it, has taken care of so many of those things through education. I do have 3 accredited college degrees. I graduated from Abilene Christian University with a Bachelor of Science in Education, from the University of Houston with a Master's in Fine Art Studio, and again from the University of Houston with an EDD in Curriculum and Instruction. I would very much like to serve again in the ever-important field of education. And of course, serving with this board would be a good reason because of the emphasis that they put on education. A second reason that I want to run is because I believe so strongly in diversity. Diversity makes us strong, and I'm very grateful to NISD because it has a wide-ranging elements of diversity, and I've heard those mentioned tonight. I was pleased to hear the budget stream support that is coming for different elements of diversity. Basically, if we don't have diversity, we are stagnant, totally become stagnant. When that happens, original and creative ideas do not flow, higher order thinking does not happen, correct judgment is a wash, synthesizing does not seem to happen without diversity. We just get complacent. Ideas just don't flow in large numbers if we do not master diversity. I've had many opportunities to work with diverse populations, to work in many diverse cultures, and they have all taught me many things. I have enjoyed watching Northside's many different diverse elements put in place and just beautifully executed. So I really want to serve among diversity, and this seems the place where that could happen. My third reason that I want to run is because I can state it and summarize it very concisely. I believe in synergism. The total effect is always greater than the sum of the associated individual effects. In other words, I am a team player, and I will give 110% effort. So that's it. In conclusion, I want to thank the superintendent and the trustees for this opportunity. I want to reiterate that I do want to serve as a 110%er, and I believe that Northside offers the best choice. This is why I'm running. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Kevin Escobar.
Welcome.
Good evening, Dr. Woods, members of the board. It's great to be here. I'm excited to announce my candidacy for District 7. Again, my name is Kevin Escobar. I'll take this time to tell you a little bit about myself. I was born and raised here in San Antonio, a product of Northside, the son of lifelong educators here in San Antonio as well. I went to Scobie Elementary, Stinson Middle School, and graduated from O'Connor High School. After that, I went to Texas Tech, finished my degrees there with a Bachelor of Business Administration and Finance, a Master of Business Administration, and a Master of Science in Financial Planning. When I returned home to San Antonio, I began my career in public finance at the City of San Antonio. I'm currently employed at Frost Bank, where I'm an investment banker, assisting school districts throughout the state in the issuance and sale of their bonds. I want to note I am married, and I do have a beautiful 8-month-old baby who's probably getting ready for bedtime right now, but she'll serve as my motivation for everything I do to make sure this school district moves in the right direction going forward. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. You can follow me on social media for all my platforms and priorities at Kevin47. Please also take some time to visit my website, votekevin47.com. And again, I look forward to the process, and I look forward to joining y'all on the board in a few short months. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thanks. So in thinking about running for another term, I really had to revisit my purpose and my core values. And really, it's always been faith, family, and service, particularly service to children. And I thought back where my journey with the core values began. And it began with my first family, my brothers and sisters. We all went to John Marshall. We all were in different clubs and organizations and volunteered and worked. My father, upon returning from Vietnam, was the first PTA president of Hobby Middle School. And so we had really incredible examples. My mother was an educator. So with that, my next family, we had children. And I was an educator at the time and an administrator in several different districts, including Northside, and was actively involved in the O'Connor, Stinson, and Leon Springs PTAs, mentoring with CIS and many other organizations and committees, but really, really had my bucket filled and hopefully filled other people's bucket with volunteerism and service and support. My next family includes now my grandchildren and my children who have wonderful spouses who are in Northside. And so I volunteer as a trustee and giving back to all that wonderful partnerships we had with schools when I was a student, when my children were students at O'Connor, and let's see, Leon Springs and Stinson, and now with Nicholas and Catalina. So it is in my blood. I do also want to say that I think one of the things that I enjoy the most is being part of the Northside family, which is kind of my fourth family in this team of 8, because of our collective purpose in doing what's best for kids, all 103,000 kids. And really, we take that very seriously. I don't know who said this quote, but I've loved it for a long time. Do what you'll love, and you'll never work another day in your life. I truly believe that. I love this. This isn't work. When I've had people say to me, being a trustee is a thankless job, I say back to them, no, it's not. It's a thankful job, because it's what I love. It's the people I love. It's my Northside family, our children, our staff, our community. It's for that reason I want to continue to serve the Northside family and announce my candidacy for District 6. And that does it.
It does. Dr. Harrell, we do need to go into closed session briefly.
We do. And let me get that. All right. The Board of Trustees on February 9th, 2021 at 7:03 p.m. will convene in closed meeting in accordance to the Texas Government Code, Section 551.074. Discussion will take place on the following items: appointment of Executive Director of Elementary Administration, appointment of principal at Scarborough Elementary School. 7:03. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay. Yep, I see him. Okay, the Board of Trustees on February 9th, beginning at, I'm looking for the time, 7:14 p.m. will convene an open meeting. Action will take place on the following items: appointment of Executive Director of Elementary Administration and appointment of principal at Scarborough Elementary School. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Ms. Reed. Is there a second? All right, Mr. Blunt is seconded. We'll do a roll call vote. Dr. Harrell, aye. Ms. Freeman?
Aye.
Mr. Medina?
Aye.
Mr. Lopez?
Aye.
Mr. Blunt?
Aye.
Ms. Reed? All right, the ayes have it. The appointments have been approved. The board will end its meeting right now at 7:15.
Thank y'all. Appreciate you.
Yay, you too. Thank you. Stay warm, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Gerald Joseph. Are they gone?
Bye-bye.